Afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Morrill, and I'm a member of the Greater Concord Interfaith Council and also a member of Christ the King Parish here in Concord. And on behalf of the council, I want to welcome you all to our 63rd Lenten Luncheon series. And this is the third in our series of luncheon programs. And I want to thank Susan Rock and Pat Fredette for being here today to share information about the Stephen Ministry, which we'll be hearing more about from them shortly. But the Lenten Luncheons have been held for many years in Concord, and usually we are able to offer an opportunity for a face-to-face gathering along with a meal and fellowship, but due to the pandemic, we've had to modify things a bit the last year or so, but we are pleased to be able to present a program to you on Zoom. And I want to thank, Chris Paul and Dory Bongiovanni, as well as Pastor Eleanor Kimball for their support and technical support and planning. And our time frame today is technically 12:15 to 1 o'clock, but we have a few minutes after the speakers finish for them to hear any questions, and you can do that verbally, or you can use the chat icon on your screen. I said to do that. And today's program is free, but you are invited to contribute if you wish to Bridget's House of Hope, which is a shelter in New Hampshire for victims of human trafficking, or to Church World Service, which is providing support for Afghan refugees. And there's more information about this on the Greater Concord Interfaith Council website. I would like to begin with a prayer, if we could just quiet ourselves for a moment. And this is a prayer in the Catholic tradition from St. Patrick, who was the evangelizer of the Christian faith, mainly in Ireland, but he left us this prayer, which I think we could all relate to. May the strength of God guide us. May the power of God preserve us. May the wisdom of God instruct us. May the hand of God guide us. May the way of God protect us. May the shield of God defend us. May the angels of God guard us against the snares of the evil one. May Christ be with us. May Christ be before us. May Christ be in us. May Christ be over all. May thy grace, Lord, always be ours, this day, Lord, and forevermore. Amen.
Amen.
It's my pleasure now to introduce Pat Fredette and Susan Rock, and who are leaders of the Stephen Ministry in Christ the King Parish, which is a one-on-one volunteer ministry, through supervised and trained lay volunteers, and provides support to people going through life difficulties. And Pat Fredette has been a nurse for over 50 years and says she has been blessed to have a wonderful career. She graduated from Burbank School of Nursing, and then to celebrate turning 60, she went back to school and received advanced degrees, including a master's degree in nursing leadership. She lives in Manchester, New Hampshire, and has 2 adult sons, the youngest in Virginia Beach, and her older son lives in New Boston with his wife and 7-year-old son. As Pat was getting ready to retire, she began looking for a ministry that would enable her to use her nursing experience. And she's been a Stephen minister since 2015 and completed training as a Stephen leader in 2020. And Susan Rock has also spent many years, as a nurse, and says she became attracted to the Stephen ministry after being encouraged to do so by a friend. And she's now been a Stephen minister for more than a dozen years and finds it a potent way to serve others. Susan worked for many years with the Red Cross, and which helped her develop a strong background of listening and caring for others. And while she was working at the Red Cross, she served as a team member on several trips to Louisiana to help people recover from Hurricane Katrina. And some of you who have attended Lenten luncheons before may remember that Susan spoke to us very eloquently about that experience. And she also has illustrated that in fiber art, which is one of her creative interests. And I can say that I have been a Stephen minister for about 6 months now, and I feel grateful to have received training and guidance along with other trainees and Stephen ministers from Susan and her husband Bob and from Pat. And so I can witness firsthand to their dedication and their caring. So without further ado, and I will let you talk some more about this very helpful ministry.
Thank you. I'm going to try and screen share and open up the PowerPoint, so bear with me.
Thank you, Margaret, for such a nice introduction.
There we go. Oops. Okay, Susan, you're starting.
All right. So at the end of this presentation, our numbers will be there too. So I'd like to thank you for inviting us to share a little bit about Stephen Ministry. It's a ministry that's really dear to my heart and Pat's as well. I've been in Stephen Ministry probably close to 20 years and walked with many people who have felt like they were in crisis. And it's been a true blessing in my life. So Pat, if you want to go on to the next slide, please.
Yep.
So Stephen ministers are, I need to move this picture thing. Let me see if I can't see the whole screen. Let's see if it's gonna go.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You know what? If you go, it will come across down the bottom if you move it enough.
Yeah, I did. Okay. So what is Stephen Ministry? Stephen ministers are lay Christian men and women trained to provide one-to-one listening care to adults who are experiencing a life challenge. So you want to go on, Pat?
Yep. So how did Stephen Ministry begin? Kenneth Hogg is a pastor and clinical psychologist who was pastor of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church in St. Louis, Missouri, and that is still where the headquarters of Stephen Ministry is. Fresh out of seminary and with a heart for caregiving ministry, he was looking forward to making a positive impact on his congregation and community by providing pastoral care to all those experiencing grief, hospitalization, divorce, discouragement, and other life difficulties. Very quickly, though, he found that the needs for care by far exceeded which he alone could provide. He faced one of a pastor's greatest frustrations, seeing people slipping through the cracks because their urgent needs were going unmet. In November of 1974, he discussed the situation with two seminary friends over a cup of coffee. The conversation turned to Ephesians 4, which said, equipping the saints for the work of ministry. Great description of what Stephen Ministry is. Dr. Hogg realized that because God gave all of his people gifts for ministry, one of his roles as a pastor was to equip others to use their gifts. Dr. Hogg returned to St. Stephen's with a plan. In the coming months, he recruited 9 lay people who had gifts and a heart to do caring ministry. He then used his combined backgrounds in theology and psychology to develop a training program in Christian caregiving. By March of 1975, the 9 were commissioned as Stephen ministers. Their first care receivers included a widow, a blind person, a young woman with cancer, a truck driver forced to retire early, and an inactive member struggling with faith issues. That's just the beginning of the gamut of folks that we work with. Christ the King is one of more than 13,000 congregations from more than 180 Christian denominations that now have Stephen ministry. Over 600,000 people have been trained as Stephen ministers, a number that grows by tens of thousands each year. More than 1.5 million people across the United States, Canada, and the world have been touched by God's love through a Stephen minister. Through all of these people, including our own Stephen ministers and their care receivers, the story of Stephen ministry continues. And at Christ the King, there has been a Stephen ministry program or ministry for over 30 years. Susan, you're on.
Yes. So a Stephen minister attends a 50-hour training program. And I want to read some of the chapter titles that Stephen ministers go through during their training. So first of all, they learn about who the person is that they might be caring for. And the second chapter is called Feelings, Yours, Mine, and Ours. And then we look at the art of listening, and then how to give care distinctively in a Christian manner. And then the process of caring, assertiveness, relating gently and firmly, maintaining boundaries in caregiving, crisis theory and practice, confidentiality, caring between visits, caregiving and communication technology, using mental health professionals, ministering to those in grief, caring for those with depression, understanding suicide. And there are several other chapters. And we have ongoing education. We meet twice a month, and usually at one of those meetings, one of the Stephen ministers will present some new information. So our learning is ongoing. So Stephen ministers meet with their care receivers weekly. So we call the person who that we're caring for a care receiver. It's kind of a Stephen ministry lingo. We provide a safe, confidential place for the care receiver to verbalize struggles or concerns. A Stephen minister learns without passing judgment, brings the love of Jesus by praying for and with their care receiver if they're open to that. Stephen ministers' support is not limited to end-of-life issues. And oftentimes people, when they think of Stephen ministry, they think of someone walking with someone who is experiencing grief. Sometimes a person just needs another ear to listen to in a caring, confidential manner. So those are some of the things that Stephen ministers do. Can you go on, Pat?
Yep. So Stephen ministers are the after people. After the phone call you hoped you'd never get, after the funeral when everyone is left and the emotions you've held at bay come crashing in on you, after the relationship falls apart and the bottom falls out of your life, after the doctor says, I'm sorry, but there's nothing more we can do, After the nursing home director shakes your hand and says, "Welcome to your new home." After the last child honks the horn, waves, and drives away, and then the house suddenly seems very empty. The gavel comes down, the handcuffs go on, and your loved one is led away. The baby arrives, demanding more of you than you ever dreamed possible. You find a pink slip in your last paycheck. Your family and friends have heard your story one too many times, but you still need to talk it out. We walk with our care receivers for as long as they need us. During the training, one of the things that we keep reinforcing is our job is just to be there to listen, to be non-judgmental, and to keep showing up.
Who would benefit from a Stephen minister? Someone coping with death of a family member or someone they love. A diagnosis, a major medical issue, or catastrophic injuries. Husband and wife, child, family member being deployed with the armed services. The loss of a job, someone being in the middle of a divorce, a difficult marriage. Difficulties coping with adjusting in infertility, adoption, miscarriage. Life changes like a new baby, empty nest, moving to a new location, coping with the after effects of a national disaster. Now, I have to tell you, it makes Stephen ministers sound like they really know everything. But in fact, we're always learning. And one of the things that we do to help each other is we meet twice a month, and we call these meetings supervision. And that means that no Stephen minister is ever out there alone trying to help someone who's going through a difficult time in their life. So at supervision, we discuss how the Stephen minister is feeling about their assignment and any difficulties that they may have in the conversation. So you want to go on now, Pat?
And the other thing that came to mind as you were talking, Susan, is that all of us come to Stephen ministry with our own life experiences. And during supervision, it's not uncommon for somebody to say, well, I kind of had that happen to me and this worked for me. So we're able to share things that have helped us personally going through a time of upheaval in our lives, something that may have worked with one of our care receivers. So supervision actually becomes continuous learning experience as we learn from each other how we're walking with our care receivers. And in this, because we're such a small community, the other thing is we do maintain confidentiality. We don't talk about names. We give as minimal background to somebody's issues as possible, enough so everybody understands where we're going, but enough so people can understand where our struggle is. And it also is very helpful. I had a care receiver for 5 years, and I struggled with it because I felt like we weren't going anywhere. Susan hasn't said this yet, but another theme song throughout the whole training is we're the caregivers, God's the cure giver. We don't have to fix anything. Our job is to be there to hold somebody's hand, give them a safe shoulder to cry on and to vent, and help them deal with whatever the struggle is and let God do the cure giving.
Our referral process for care receivers. At Christ the King, I am the referral coordinator, and it is a very challenging job. We receive referrals from multiple sources, from our parish priests, staff, visiting nurses, family, friends, other ministries. Oftentimes I find them just by talking, just by having some conversation with someone. We're also in contact with the Payson Center at Concord Hospital and Riverbend. One of our Stephen leaders will take the referral and then schedule an interview with a potential care receiver. During the interview with a Stephen leader, Stephen ministry will be explained to them, and we usually what I do is listen to them, and oftentimes at this point a person will just talk and talk and talk, and it's the beginning of their healing, really, as the referral process. If the person is found appropriate for a Stephen minister, a Stephen leader will assign the care receiver to a Stephen minister. This is a prayerful process. The needs of the care receiver and the strengths of the Stephen minister are considered. So, Pat, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, just that it's also prayerful in that Susan and I will talk about our Stephen ministers. If somebody has gone through a recent loss of a family member, they may not be at a point emotionally themselves that they can take on a care receiver that's working through grief. So we really prayerfully look at both the care receiver and the Stephen minister to make sure that they fit, so that it's successful for both people. So these are some little vignettes, and this is right out of the Stephen Ministry website. So one care receiver said, although my needs changed as I went from wife to caregiver to widow, my Stephen minister's love and support remained constant. She was there at every stage of my journey, helping me through some of the most difficult moments of my life so I could begin to heal. Somebody else wrote, when things seemed like too much to handle, my Stephen minister brought normalcy and calm. With him by my side, I knew I could make it from one week to the next. I could feel God's presence when my Stephen minister was there. Another one was, my Stephen minister was a consistent presence walking with me throughout my divorce. He would always show up. And most importantly, he refused to give up on me. I will forever be grateful for the way he changed my life. When I was with my Stephen minister, I felt Jesus was with me. I saw the love of God in her eyes while we talked and prayed. It would fill me with such comfort and peace. It helped me know that I could make it through it. And another person, I needed to know that there was one person in the world who knew the good, the bad, and the ugly about me, but still cared. Experiencing that through my Stephen minister was a tangible expression of God's love. It changed my life. And I think all of us as Stephen ministers, we gain as much as we give. It's a very, very rewarding process.
So I want to talk a little bit more about how important supervision is to the whole working of Stephen ministry. We consider that if a person who is a Stephen minister isn't attending supervision, they aren't really part of Stephen ministry. It's many of the people that we have as care receivers are in pretty tough shape, and it can be a long hour with someone who is crying and emotionally totally upset. And so that Stephen minister really needs to be supported, and that's really what supervision is all about. And I think that is like, if I could use the word magic, that is the magic of Stephen Ministry, that Reverend Hope thought to have a support system for the person giving care. So there are other real benefits to supervision too. We form a very tight community of caring for each other, and not just in Stephen Ministry efforts, but in life. So that we've all found that that has been a really big asset in our lives.
Yeah. I think one of the
So-
other things that happens with supervision is we really help people maintain boundaries. Because a lot of folks that are very, very needy, you can find yourself running to the grocery store. I've done that. Buying their groceries because their food stamps didn't come in. I've done that. Taking them here, there, and everywhere because they're so needy, you're trying so hard. People can be texting and calling you daily. So we really work with the Stephen ministers to try to help them set boundaries so it remains a therapeutic relationship. Not that you just become another caregiver in their group of people that are waiting on them.
So Pat, are there any questions in the chat?
I don't know. Nope.
Okay, so maybe we could go back to the.
So I'm going to stop the screen share so we can
Right.
go back. There we go.
Yeah.
Hi,
And that way you can see if people want to say something, they can either raise their hand or just
sure.
unmute and jump in if you're comfortable with that.
Pamela,
I'm curious as to how the program has gone on through the pandemic. We at Bow Mills also have a Stephen Ministry program, but it's struggling.
yeah.
We're really struggling.
We've actually run 2 classes on Zoom. We're about halfway through our 2nd class. And I was very concerned how that was going to work when I did the Stephen Leaders Training in September of 2020. It was on Zoom and it worked marvelously. So that gave me a level of comfort that we could teach a class.
Yeah.
I think, Margaret, you did our first Zoom class.
I'm sorry, what was that?
When we did your training,
yes.
You did a Zoom class.
Yes.
And how did that work out for you?
No, it worked out fine. You know, I think we had a few of our classes face to face, but
At the end, yeah.
at the end, but I felt, comfortable with it. I felt able to communicate and be open with other people, and fortunately the computer cooperated, and so that was workable for me.
Yeah,
And then
I think, Pamela, the other thing is that we did go to phoning for the caregiving. The hardest part was referrals, because we weren't seeing people,
Right.
So, but that's all changed, and I'm getting a lot of referrals at this point.
Right. Thank you.
And one of the places we are getting referrals with the start of the pandemic, Christ the King started an outreach program where we were given phone lists of people, parishioners that were registered. So we started like with the 80-up-year-old.
Yeah.
And as the outreach workers were calling people, they were checking in. And if somebody seemed to need more than just a check-in phone call, we started getting referrals.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So
Lori.
Hi, do you visit with people that are in the nursing homes? helping them
Yes.
to adjust to that type of life?
Yes, we do. We're not able to be very effective with someone who has dementia. And so, you know, during the referral process, that would probably be someone who wouldn't be considered to have a Stephen minister.
Without that, you go and visit, so.
Yeah.
We've
Joyce?
also seen people in hospice. We've gone to the hospice health with somebody. We have one couple that they have two Stephen ministers, one for the husband and one for the wife.
Okay, Joyce?
It sounds like a most wonderful and needed ministry. I have a couple of questions. I'm wondering, and I'm imagining that sometimes the needs of a care receiver are possibly more than a Stephen minister can give or handle. And I wonder, you know, how do Stephen ministers know when it's time to call in a professional in a particular field? And the second question is, when the care receiver no longer needs a caregiver to walk along with him or her, how is the ministry sort of phased out? Does it just come to an end, or how does it get phased out?
Good questions.
I was going to say the same thing. Go for it, Pat.
Well, as far as both issues are dealt with in supervision. So if somebody is coming to supervision and talking about their care receiver no longer being safe at home, very confused, or having trouble connecting with them, that would be a point that we would need to make referrals outside. If somebody is very, very depressed, so their grief is gone beyond normal grief to that they're non-functioning, we would talk with them about a referral for counseling and ask them to contact Riverbend. We have a list of resources that each of the Stephen ministers has with contact information. And then as far as phasing out, that's one of the things that we talk about a lot during supervision, because it's not meant to be a forever service. Typically it's 6 months to a year. I happen to have somebody that I walked with for 5 years. But we kind of wean it down. So if the weekly meetings, the person starts wanting to skip them, we'll say, how about if we make it every 2 weeks and then maybe once a month check-in? And it's usually an agreement with the care receiver and the Stephen minister that we have guided them through. I had one lady who kept saying, well, how long do I have to talk to you? And I finally said, when I show up and you have nothing to say. So we sat down and she yacked at me for an hour. So I said, I guess I'll see you next week. But once she ran out of things to say and her life became busier, we finally decided that was when she didn't need me anymore.
Something else that we didn't mention, at Christ the King, we will see anyone. They do not have to be a Christian, and they do not have to be part of Christ the King.
Okay. That's my question. Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm just wondering, Pat, you said that you worked with somebody for 5 years. Was that the only person that you were? I mean, it sounds like these relationships can be fairly time-consuming and emotionally take up a lot of energy. Do you generally one person at a time, or do you find yourself having multiple?
Before I became a student leader, it was not unusual for me to have 2 people. But this person I had for 5 years, it went from meeting weekly. We did that for a couple of years. Then she seemed pretty stable. She had a lot of mental health issues. So then we had to play, let's make a deal to bring it down to twice a month and then monthly. And we did that for a while. And she still randomly calls me when she's in crisis.
Mm. But for the most part, it's sort of one one relationship at a time for the most part.
For the most part, we wouldn't give somebody two difficult patients. Maybe they have one person they're starting to wean down from Stephen ministry, then we'd give them another one. But definitely somebody wouldn't have two difficult people.
Yes, and the Stephen minister is always able to say, because of my own life situation, I can't take somebody right now.
Yeah.
And we've been successful in they're comfortable saying that. So we don't overload the Stephen ministers.
Mhm.
That's obviously primary, or we wouldn't have a ministry, you know. Yeah.
And we wouldn't be effective if everybody's burnt out.
Yeah.
Good question.
It's common for Stephen ministers to, they make a 2-year commitment after the training. And some people find that they're willing to do it for 2 years, but it's not really their calling. They feel that way and they may leave. Like I've been a Stephen minister for many years, and so have, I would say 50% of our Stephen ministers are at least 5 years into the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sharing.
one more thing I'd like to share with you.
Sure.
How do you go about finding someone that would be a good referral? So all of you can help us find people who need a Stephen minister. You have just an ordinary conversation with someone and they start telling you how upset they are about a life situation that you know is serious. And you listen to them and you say, well, do you have someone you can really talk to? And they'll say, well, not really. And then it's your little shoe in to say, well, I know about a ministry who has people who are trained, who just come and spend an hour a week with you and just listen to you and care. And you can say anything to them and it's confidential. And guess what? All of you now know just exactly what you have to say to when you meet someone who's in trouble. It's not a scary thing. It's just an ordinary conversation that you have with someone. You want to add to that, Pat?
No, that's good. That's good.
So
For sharing. I really knew very little. Margaret, a few comments from Margaret in the past when she was taking this training. So I've learned a lot, and I admire your commitment and what you do. And it's
And Stephen Ministry has a wonderful website if somebody wants to learn more about it. If somebody has a parish or a church that might be interested in starting Stephen Ministry, there's all the information on the Stephen Ministry website.
So that would be another question I have. So Pam said they have this ministry at Bow Mills. Do you know of any other churches or communities in our area other than Christ the King and Bow Mills that have a Stephen ministry?
St. Paul's used to, and Center Point does, and there is a church in Loudon that does.
Okay.
And we are in communication with the different churches. And Pamela, your Stephen ministers, we have talked with them before, but we'd be happy to share our enthusiasm with them and you
Well,
know.
we have three Stephen ministry leaders, two of whom moved away. So they are no longer around. So we only have one now that is trained as a leader.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure where we're at with continuing the program. So, but I appreciate that offer, and I will let her know
Okay.
and the
And
pastor
some,
know.
okay, panelists, something else that you might like to know is that Stephen Ministries in St. Louis is now doing leader training on Zoom. And
Oh, right.
we have a young man who works full-time and he's becoming a leader. He's taking classes for 5 Monday evenings. So
Okay.
it's really doable for even people who are out there working now.
Okay. That's good to know.
And
Thank you.
it's an interesting experience to be with people from many different faiths across the country. I was in a number of breakout sessions that I got to meet a lot of different people. It was, for me, I'm a very quiet person. So I was actually more interactive on Zoom than I would have been if I had to go to a conference and sat in the back row and didn't talk.
Have recorded this. I managed this time. I pressed the button before we got started, so we've got the whole thing. I'm going to stop recording in a minute or two, but leave the meeting open for a few more minutes if people want to chat.
Margaret raised her hand.
Okay.
Oh, I just a comment that I think that one of the things that's become apparent in the several months that I've been a Stephen minister is that I think you learn something, valuable from your care receiver, and it's, though your focus is on helping them, one of the indirect, I think, benefits too is that they help you. Like I've learned something from my own care receiver about faith, about courage, about resilience. So in a way, they grow you,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's one thing that I have noticed, one of the blessings as we go along.
Beautiful, Margaret.
But anyway.
Have two more of these luncheons scheduled. Next Thursday, we'll have Rick Eames, who is from the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Concord, and a representative from there, and he's also our Interfaith Council's representative to United Religions Initiative, and Rabbi Pam Friedman, who was recently relocated to New England and who is active in URI. They're going to be speaking next week. And then we'll wrap up on April 7th with Adam Smedberg, who's the community engagement specialist for Church World Service for the Northeast. He works with us on Crop Walk. And I had asked him originally to talk about Church World Service's work with Afghan refugees and how, and their connections to local programs, how, because they do have local affiliates that they work with. In the meantime, the war, has broken out in the Ukraine, and Church World Service is working with that population as well. So I think Adam will be talking a little bit about both on the 7th. So with that, the other thing that Margaret mentioned at the beginning is when we had the luncheons in person, I think each host church chose an organization or a charity to have donations go to. It's a little harder to do that on Zoom, but this year we are, if you would like to make a donation, we're encouraging people to make donations to Bridget's House of Hope. They were speakers for our first luncheon, and Bridget's House of Hope is a shelter for victims of survivors of human trafficking, or to Church World Service, to the Afghan, the program that is specifically to the Afghan refugees. But I think I'm also going to add a link for people who might want to donate more specifically to what's going on in the Ukraine. But I'll post the links that I have in the chat box. They're also on the Interfaith Council's website. They're on the flyer that many of you received, and we're in the first couple of emails. you can make donations online, or if you're not comfortable doing that, you can send a check to the Interfaith Council and just note that it's a donation for one of those things. And Eleanor, we'll make sure that it gets passed on to where it needs to go. So that, is there anything anyone else, I'm going to stop recording, but is there anything else anyone would like to share that we want to make sure gets recorded for those people who might be listening later? All right, well, if that's the case, I'm going to stop the recording.
I think Eleanor raised her hand.
Oh,
I'd just
okay.
like to
Yeah, I can't-
express
you just have to pipe
appreciation.
in.
I'd just like to express our appreciation for your presentation today. It was
Oh,
very
thank you.
interesting and inspirational. We thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Right. So I'm going to